in Guilty, he said, right at the end, 'cause I'm guilty. He just picked up the dictaphone and he went, of loving you. And it was like,
Wow.
And they're talking about the value of a CD and how much it should cost. And he said, well, some CDs you couldn't say are very good value, but then a CD by Def Leppard, it's really good value because they worked for 3 years on it.
Well, we might touch upon another non-guitarist who played with the band on Euphoria.
Yes, the great Damon Hill.
Yeah. In fact, quickly, do you want to talk about how that came about?
Yeah, he was living in Dublin and he was a guitarist. He loved playing guitar in his band, and somehow Joe would be able to tell you how they got in touch. But it's like, come round for dinner. So we all went round for dinner, and it was lovely. And Malvin was there in the band, and Damon, his wife Georgie, and it was really nice. And his kids were in. It was a lovely sunny day, as far as I remember. Anyway, at some point during dinner, after a few glasses of wine, there was like, what do you want to play on the album? He's like, yeah. So he came. He's a really nice guy, and we just, yeah. And he was very humble. He was so nice. I remember when he finished I said, that's great, fantastic. And we were just in Joe's house. He said, I'll be off then. And I said, you should say goodbye because the guys are upstairs. And he did in the end, but just a very nice guy.
We always hear that the band are really nice guys. And you mentioned to me on the phone that
they're great.
They're just amazing. So I think it'd be, it pleased the fans that, they are as good as...
A genuinely lovely guy. You couldn't spend 3 years or 12 years, but 3 years on one album. They're great guys. They're really good. I'm still in touch, we're still mates.
Good.
It's been 20 years since I last tried ruining their career. So, yeah. Euphoria was post slang. Things had kind of calmed down. I think there was the slang. It was like it became okay. Suddenly it was like, okay, you can be Def Leppard again. It's fine. Mm-hmm. So let's just make a really good Def Leppard album and see how we go. And it was great. It was good to do. And we did it in Dublin. And Phil was always in touch with Mutt, their mates, and we had so. Martin said, do you have anything kicking around, any tracks? And we got the track for Promises. There was no lyrical music, no lyrical melody, just the instrumental. And it sounded great. That guitar at the beginning, we were like, this is very cool. So we sent that to Mutt. A few weeks later, it came back with a lead guide vocal and all the backing vocals. And it was just one of those moments in the studio you go, oh, that's good. It's a great record. I loved it. So and then he came out for a week in Dublin, and we worked on All Night and
It's Only Love. Yeah, I always forget about It's Only Love.
Yeah. So he worked on those, and then on the Saturday, the band had a personal trainer coming in who'd been coming in all the way through the album, and so he said, "We got to go." And I said, "Okay." So I was there with Mutt, and he was so great because I said, "Mutt, can I play you some songs that we aren't working on, and maybe here's a dictaphone, and you just any ideas off the top of your head?" And he just sat there in the back of the room and it was a masterclass in producing and absolutely fantastic. So on Guilty, Mutt always talks about the moment of a song, the point in a song where you go, and it's just that pivot, that thing. And in Guilty, he said, right at the end, 'cause I'm guilty. He just picked up the dictaphone and he went, of loving you. And it was like, just genius. Just simple, but not simple at all. Genius. He's amazing. So I had a whole morning with Mutt going through stuff. And then I remember the first interview, I got a call, the only interview, I got a call at the mastering of Euphoria in Portland, Maine. And the phone rings and it's Def Leppard's management. They said, there's a guy from whatever Guitar Rock World magazine in America wants to interview you about the album. I said, oh, sure. And he rang and said, oh man, it must have been great working with Mutt Lange. It's like that song Paper Sun, it's just Mutt's a genius. I said, well, he's never heard it. He hadn't. It was one of the songs that we hadn't done at that point. So
you've got a co-write on Paper Sun and Guilty, I believe.
Yeah. Well, Paper Sun Paper Sun was you know, The Chain on Rumours by Fleetwood Mac, which was a song where they got bits. Well, Paper Sun, there were riffs and sections, and there was bits of lyric, and we kind of glued it together basically, and so that was great. You know, nice to get a Def Leppard co-write. I'd always been far too studio person, uncreative, not uncreative, but the writing was what the band did, and they would, you know, they were fine, great, and welcomed it, and like, yeah, great, help, which was really nice. And then when in 2000 I had kids, just before we did 10X, I'd had 2 kids, 1 kid, and actually 2 kids just before we started, and I was, what do I do? You know, do I go off and make records? And I thought I can write because I've been doing stuff with them. Much one of the great, you know, as a songwriter, if you look at his career from, you know, AC/DC, The Cars, Def Leppard, Bryan Adams, Shania Twain, his hit to shit ratio is the best in the business. As I think Bob Lefsetz once said. So yeah, so I was there purely to try and keep it going and make it sound great, as great as we could. Yeah, and the band were just so supportive, and it's really cool. It was a good time.
It's good to hear.
He listens to music like a 15, 16-year-old kid. He listens to what is exciting. His whole thing was, you know, don't make it sound like a Led Zeppelin record. Make it sound like you imagined Led Zeppelin when you were 15 and you first heard that album. You know, what Steven Spielberg, make it a bigger, better, more exciting thing. And his songwriting, you know, Shania Twain, 33 million copies have come on over, the biggest female album of all time ever. Yeah, you don't, and that was an album that the record company went,
Not really, jeez.
You know, he's a very wise mentor. You know, he's a great guy to be with and to get advice from, because it is hard. You know, you never know which song is going to be the one that is successful. You never know the reaction of people, so you just have to make it great. And that thing of going back and saying, look, we can make a better verse than that. There was I think Goodbye had an 8-bar solo, you know, normal format, 8 bars. And he said, just make it small, and so it suddenly became a 3-bar solo, and great.
Yeah, I've made a big note here to talk about the backing vocals on Euphoria, because that album in particular is just, it's so satisfying. I mean, even on a song like Back in Your Face, which is one that when I was younger, I remember not listening to that much. You know, I'd go to my favorite. My favorite is actually Guilty. I like Guilty and Day After Day.
Guilty.
But I remember with Back in Your Face, it's like that payoff at the end. Sheer heart attack and a jumping jack flesh. It's like, it's just very satisfying, and it's hard, but it's kind of comforting. It just gets you in a way. The blend, yes.
The blend of Phil, Viv, and Sav, it's just great. And it's when we'd finished that current board album, and they were setting up the tour in Dublin and doing, I remember going in there rehearsing Let's Get Rocked, and I'm thinking, it's all backing vocals. You know, there's backing vocals through the verse, the bridge, and the 3 of them just nailing it. And, you know, and everyone going, they're using tape. Yeah, they have a very good blend. They sound good. And the energy, the way Phil, they sing full voice. There's no, it's not a lightweight, thick, soft thing. It's that aggressive.
There's a little anecdote about when the album was getting mastered by Bob Ludwig, and he was asking about the backing vocals.
Yeah, that's right. Because Bob Ludwig is a legend, total legend. He's done records from way back, you know, Bryan Adams, Bruce Springsteen. And he puts on, you know, when you're mastering an album, you finish a song and you come to the next song, and the guy plays it for the first time and listens, and you're thinking, part of you, it's like going to the dentist. You're thinking, oh no, he's going to say that's got to come out, you know. And he told me a story how an album by a famous artist, the producer had played it to him, and he'd listened to it. He said, I think you can do better on this one. Sent him to go and remix it. So you're always a little apprehensive. So he listened to his Paper Sun, yeah? Yes. Mm-hmm. And he goes, now, how do you do that baggy vocal sound? And, you know, and literally wrote down, because he said, I always get asked, people say with Def Leppard, what is that sound? And so explain. And it's just it's loads of tracks. And I remember before I worked with them, someone said, oh yeah, you just double track it and then use an Aphex oral exciter, and that makes it sound like that. But it's not.
No.
The energy of the singing, don't sing it, you know, it's not living on a paper, it's full voice, very aggressive, you know, that feels completely beat by the time they've done 20 tracks of it, and that massive energy, but then loads of tracks and 3 of them doing each part, maybe one doing the high part, one doing the low, but yeah, and it sounds, and then when you EQ it, you have to take out, because there are horrid frequencies, all that thing, so you take that out, and it sounds like this one aggressive voice, like some demon. But it's a very Def Leppard thing. It doesn't work with, wouldn't work with Lionel Richie.
No, of course not.
I remember Thomas Dolby being interviewed on a radio show about the cost of CDs, because when Euphoria came out, I think it was £18.99 to buy the CD in the UK. And I was thinking, blimey, it's... Anyway, Thomas Dolby was on this radio program on Radio 4, and they're talking about the value of a CD and how much it should cost. And he said, well, you know, some CDs, you couldn't say a very good value. But then a CD by Def Leppard, it's really good value because they worked for 3 years on it.
So was Euphoria the first involvement with Ronan?
I think it was. I think Jer was working on it and then he had to leave. I don't think Ronan was on Slang. No, I think it was Euphoria. And yeah, so Ronan pitched up and was great. You know, and I was thinking, Jer had said, Pete, I've got a bombshell. I'm going to have to leave the project. I've got another album I've got to do. And I was like, oh, no, what am I going to do? And then Ronan turned up and he was great too. I mean, they're the loveliest. I mean, Ronan does their live stuff now and the records.
Yeah.
I'd have been in a straitjacket years ago.
I was maybe going to ask because, you know, I read Nigel Green ended up going into doing the live stuff. I think for Shania, and seemed to be a progression. But that wasn't something for yourself. Maybe you wanted to do the songwriting with having a
I've never been asked, so that's which is one reason I didn't do it. But I've always, going way back, you know, I like records, I like studios, I like, you know, whether it's Ichiku Park with the Small Faces or Bowie or 10cc, those kind of great recordings, and never, I like gigs. I always feel with gigs, it's not quite right, and it's always very loud, and you can't quite figure out what's going on. So I'm definitely a studio person. I found a photo of Slang, and in the studio we had definitely got Marshall heads, we had Gallion Krugers, we had, you know, there were amps kicking around, which wouldn't have been used on Adrenalize, but on Euphoria we had a rack-mounted Rockman, but I still think we did use Marshalls and stuff. It was like whatever works. Mm-hmm. But it was things like Guilty were just that massive, tracked up, lots of different parts.
Yeah.
Thing. So that was more Rockmans and Rockbox.
Okay, I know for the live sound for that era, I think Viv and Phil moved to the Marshall JMP1 rack preamp.
They did. We used those, and also the Digitech that you did the video on.
All right. Did you?
Yeah, that was quite funny seeing that. It's like, oh yeah, the Digitech. And they used it live, but they also would use that in the studio. And things like there was a Yuri limiter, a Yuri JBL 7110 compressor, so rack-mounted compressor. And I remember using that to kind of get the Rockman sound without using a Rockman. So it's like massive compression for the clean sounds, that kind of cling, like almost infinity ratio, and using that a lot. We had a Sony M7 chorus, which is a module. It was just a weird box that Sony made, a kind of reverb box, a delay box, and a modulation box. And this one had like chorus and phasing. We used that a lot. Euphoria felt fun to do, actually, because it was, you knew what you were doing. Slang was like, whoa, this is all a bit crazy. Just I've got the tracks here. To Be Alive, I love Viv's song.
Yeah,
that's like
the slide solo. I remember. I mean, I think it still does give me goosebumps sometimes. The way the little harmonies together. I think that's a really, really great song, and it's an interesting one of how it was leopardized compared to Viv's. I mean, I don't know how many times it's been released, but I know he had a version with his band Clock.
Yeah.
It was like the kind of piano thing. But yeah, that's a beautiful song. So with going on to X,
Yes.
it's like, or 10, sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's big X. I always thought. Apparently, I think Joe. I don't know if Joe says it should be 10. There was some sort of interview. I don't know if he was just joking around.
Yeah. I think
But
it's maybe 10, but
yeah. So it's the idea of, the bands went back to that signature sound, and then they kind of went a bit further into the poppy realm. What do you recall about that time and that direction? Also with the outside writers as well coming in.
Yeah, it was. I mean, Wayne Hector and Steve Robson, the guys who wrote "Long Long Way to Go," which I love, a great song. I mean, Wayne Hector, Steve Robson went on to write lots of huge records. You know, What Hurts the Most by Rascal Flatts. He wrote that. I mean, he's from England, but from up north. But he's just talented. Shine, Take That, a bunch of records. So, it's a great song. The stuff that Marty did was great. It was all good. There was kind of poppy stuff and rock stuff, and it felt a bit bitty.
Yeah, because I remember reading or hearing an interview from Viv where he said he felt a lot of the songs could translate well live, and I certainly think, they play obviously now Long Long Way to Go, but Four Letter Word and You're So Beautiful really translated well to a bit more of a rock edge.
Yeah,
and like you say, looking at something like, Cry, and the one again you have a co-write on Scar, being, this is really, really heavy compared to A Long Long Way to Go or
yeah, it felt a bit confusing I mean, Euphoria hangs together to me better than X or 10.
Yeah. So I was just looking through Every Day as well. I think the chorus in that is great, and there's hints of the classic guitar stuff that's in there that just maybe isn't as high up in the mix.
It was kind of hidden away and unbelievable, and it's a great. It was fun. It was okay. It was good to work on, but it felt disparate, and by the way it was created. There was some people, Marty doing his thing, and the Swedes and Carlson.
I was just wanted to maybe touch on how you parted ways with the band, and obviously when you moved on to doing more stuff in your own with the songwriting and your own production company.
I'd done my time. I think I think they didn't want to make, records were not earning money. It was something was touring was earning money, and so I think, I don't know, it was fine by me. I'd done my four albums pretty much, and I had kids, and I wanted to be in London, and I think the band, Ronan had done loads of stuff with them, so it's really good, and he's great, and it didn't really end in a hideous, oh my god, it's ended. It was like being released from prison, right? Time off for good behaviour.
Looking back, how do you feel on your time with the band? Because I think I mentioned right at the start, it was quite,
what a great, fantastic opportunity, to go. I think the Adrenalize, I was frustrated because I was kind of being programmer assistant, do everything, and it took so long. It was really, and it was just not a fun time. So that was good. So Adrenalize, hard work, stressful, but I was younger, it was fun in a way, but it was really focused, and then from then on, when having done, to suddenly get the opportunity to produce a huge rock band, it's great. And Slang was a fantastic down in Spain. All good.
Do you have any particular highlights of a song that you're proud of, or you think, that's the one? If I want to be known for working on a particular song.
Paper Sun. I was proud of Paper Sun. I was proud of Action. When we did Action, I remember thinking, whatever happens, I'm gonna make this sound good. and so I was proud of that, because that was kind of the first one. And Two Sits Behind as well. That was amazing. And I had no expectation, because I was like, really? We'd just done it so relaxed and in such a casual way. And
Are there any regrets you have with your time with the band?
No, not really. It was hard trying to do, they go off on tour for 2 years, and I'd go and see my manager and say, right, what can I do next? And that was really hard because their reputation in the UK was like, oh, rock band. And when Nirvana and Pearl Jam had happened, it was like, And then I remember one year, because they'd play in London, and the odd friend would say, oh, can I come and see the band with you? And then one year, suddenly, everybody was ringing me saying, oh, can I come and see Def Leppard? And it was when The Darkness happened, and they were supporting the band on tour. And suddenly it was like, it was okay to rock again.
That must be quite a funny thing to experience, where I guess the natural cycles of music, like say the band goes out of fashion, comes back in. Even now, there's a bit of a renaissance again for that, for certainly an 80s sound. But the band have always kind of hung in, and seems to be, say, certain markets are like, oh yeah, we're in this mood again. That must be, I don't know, is that fun to see, or do you think, oh, like?
Yeah, it was just, when I spoke to them a couple of years ago, and they rang up and said, oh, you wouldn't believe, because after the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame thing in Cleveland, they suddenly were elevated to a new level of respect, which is great, because they've made some great records, and they've been together for a long time.
Can you tell us a little bit about your production company?
So I'd been writing songs from like after X or 10 with a guy called Charlie Grant, and we'd had a hit with a band called Rooster that was top 10. We'd had a hit we were writing with Busted, and on their third album, and they split up, which was irksome. And we wrote a song called Ticket Out of Loserville that was number 3 for Son of Dork, which was James from Busted's band. And we had Simply Red cut a song, and that was great. It wasn't a hit in the UK, but it was everywhere else. It was on their Greatest Hits album, a song called Send It Over You. And then we wrote a song for Cliff, and the Cliff song got to number 3. And he didn't get played much on the radio, but it was a hit, and we really earned very little money. I was like, oh, a number 3 single, because as a songwriter, you don't get paid money up front. You write songs, and some get on records and some don't. And you hope that at least when you have a number 3 single. Anyway, at the same time, we'd done just some demos really with a guy, and there was no record label, so we owned the recording, and we'd written the song. I was at the time published by Sony, EMI, and a guy in America called Marty Fredrickson, who's great. He said, oh, this is a good song. And he got us 2 ads, one in Canada, one in the States. Within, 3 months, we had these 2 massive ads. And the financial reward was substantially more than a number 3 single in the UK. So at that point, I thought, okay, well, if you write with unsigned people, you can kind of be the label. And if you manage to get some ads, some syncs or use on TV, then you can make some money. And this is at the time when streaming is coming in, and you get 1 million streams, which is really hard. Even if you own the record label, even if it's all you only make, well, £3,500 sounds like a lot of money, but it's for 1 million streams, it's a lot of people liking your music. I know Ed Sheeran gets 5 million a day. So it's as if the top of the pyramid, your Adele's and Ed Sheeran's earn a huge amount of money, but generally streaming is, most people have, was it some crazy statistic, like 60% of people on Spotify have 1 or less streams. I know. Wow. So it's and it's like getting that first 1,000 streams for new artists is really hard. My son has friends, and you're thinking, oh, they're going to get 1,000 streams. So getting 1 million is really quite something. Yeah. And if you don't own the record label, if you are just writing for Kylie Minogue, and she gets 1 million streams, and the 3 of you wrote the song, so Kylie, you, and a mate, you earn £100. So I'd got, we'd written a song in 2010 for a guy called Joe Brooks called Superman, and it wasn't a hit, but it was a kind of YouTube hit, and it had 10 million streams very quickly, and it's now had nearly 30 million. But those 10 million streams generated £25 for me, and I thought, wait a minute. And I then got involved in a thing called BASCA, which is now the Ives Academy, and alerted them to the fact that YouTube wasn't actually paying us anything. It's improved a little bit since then, but it's still, YouTube accounts for 50% of all music consumption in the world. And yet, when you get your royalty statements, it accounts for, certainly as a songwriter, not as an artist, but as a songwriter, it counts something like, the last time I worked it out, I think it's 1% of my income was from YouTube, which is not great. So I then more recently, like last year, stood to be on the PRS Council, which you mentioned, because I just think songwriting, in the old days, record companies used to have a factory to make records. They'd employ a fleet of people who would drive to all the record shops. They'd make the record, they'd make the sleeve. There was a whole industry that went behind it, and that justified the artist getting 20% of the record label money and the record label getting 80%. And that's how it was. And, you know, all the deals were like that. Now there is no factory. Streaming, someone streams it for you. And I think the #Broken Record campaign, Tom Gray and Crispin Hunt has highlighted the problem. And I think if I record a song, let's say I record Pour Some Sugar on Me, and I get it used and I do a country version, me singing, and it gets used in an advert, half the money will go to the people who wrote the song, and half the money will come to me and my record label. Why is it if I put the song out on Spotify, the songwriters only get 14% or 13%? They share that, and I keep all the rest. It doesn't make sense, because the record label is no longer providing the fact. To me, there needs to be an adjustment,
right?
And I think there hopefully will be, but it's going to be a battle, and that's why I'm doing what I do at PRS.
No, I mean, that's great to know, because I'm certainly not as familiar with the kind of, I mean, you hear about there's problems with streaming and what it affects with artists, but to hear the numbers like that, it's quite astonishing, really.
Yeah, I mean, the thing, when I was in 2005 or 6, if 3 of us, because you generally write with the artist, so 2 of you and the artist, and if 3 of you wrote a song that was on an album track for an artist, Jason Donovan or Mel C, sort of people who wanted songs at the time, and the album sold 60 to 100,000 copies, you'd earn money. You'd earn £3,500 each. But now, that album would maybe have 2 million streams, and you get 200 quid. And it's you got to write an awful lot of hit songs and be very successful to make a living out of being a songwriter. And the record labels have said, oh yes, but it's always the hit songwriters do fine. But no, hit songwriters are also saying this is just not right.
All right.
How can people aged 19, 20 get in the business if they need to have a massive worldwide hit in order to survive? I mean, streaming is great. We love streaming. The band Who's Molly, who I've spent 6 years writing with, they get streamed all over the world, and it's incredible. You see people coming in from Brazil and just incredible. And you could never have done that with an unsigned band back in the 80s, but now you can, which is great. But it needs to be adjusted the way we're paid. I think Spotify aren't the devil. I think the record labels need to accept that they take too much.
Right.
But they're not going to. they're not going to do it without some kind of intervention. And the great thing is, the Broken Record campaign has launched this, the CMA, the government inquiry into competition, and see what happens.
Okay.
I also think that people, like, when you see all these people selling their catalogs, they've had 10 years of earning really little from streaming. Now, if the thing does get adjusted and more money goes to the songwriters in going forwards, then they'll have sold at a low rate, even though it seems like a huge amount of money.
Yeah.
Because I think, hopefully going forward, it'll get corrected.
Right, Pete. That was just, I can't say enough. That was everything I've ever wanted to know. That's amazing. Thank you so much for your time. Honestly, it's I really appreciate it. I'm sure everyone's going to enjoy these stories. So I just want to say thanks very much, and I'm sure everyone at home watching would like to thank you as well.
Well, an absolute pleasure, and it was fun actually to revisit, because I hadn't thought about it for a long time. So yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Pete. All right, guys, catch you next time.